One warm evening when the sun had just gone over the horizon, the healer's car drove down a lonely 2-lane road. This road was what the healers took to reach Stripe and Trixie's house, and that was where they were heading. Chili was at the wheel while her 2 daughters, Bluey and Bingo, were in the back seat, but Bandit wasn't with them. It was silent in the car. Bluey blankly stared outside her window, Bingo stared into space, looking like she was asking herself something, and Chili looked as though she was recovering from witnessing something that would forever be stained in her mind. Finally, Bingo leaned rightward and broke the silence. "Hey, Mom, where are we going?" she asked. They had been driving for quite a while. When the trip began, Chili urgently told her daughters to get in the car and not ask any questions. And when they did, she'd cut them off, more severely than the previous time. Since then, the 2 kept their mouths shut. This time, Chili wasn't as nearly as irritated, but just as urgent. She was fully aware of something Bluey and Bingo weren't, which could explain why she didn't want them asking anything related to this, until now. Chili currently believed that the moment of keeping her daughters silent had long passed. However, she wanted to answer Bingo's question as bluntly as she could. With that, she replied with a slightly meek tone, "We're going somewhere safe." "But what about Dad?" Bingo inquired. Not wanting to worry her daughters further, Chili responded, "He just wanted to play pretend alone." Before she answered, the look of Bandit before she rushed out of the house flashed through her mind, shaking her to her core. If there were 3 ways Chili could describe his appearance, they'd be vicious, crude, and most glaringly, wolf-like. Bingo wanted to know more, though. "But why?" she asked. "Yeah, why?" Bluey agreed. "I don't know, Bluey," Chili sighed, her ears and back slumping. She truly didn't know how Bandit turned out like this. He had behaved normally nearly an hour ago. And neither could Bandit. He found himself in the black, endless void of his subconscious, on his knees and crying softly. "What's happened to me?" he tearfully asked himself, his voice reverberating. "I was only eating berries. I didn't mean to scare Chili off. Please, honey, come back with the kids. I hate being away from all of you." "Hello, Bandit," came a reverberating voice that sounded just like his, except more demonic. Bandit raised his head and looked around, his face asking, "Who said that?" Meanwhile, Chili's car began doing the last thing she wanted. It started to sputter and lose speed as it burned off its last ounces of fuel. "No, no, 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 no!" she groaned, desperately tapping the locked accelerator, more distressed than she had ever been. Hearing her mom's panicked breathing and seeing her trembling violently, Bluey asked, "Mom, is everything okay?" Chili firmly closed her eyes, trying to take a moment to calm herself. She was sweating all over and felt her heart pounding so unpleasantly it felt like it was about to burst out of her chest. "Everything's peachy, Bluey," she said shakily, knowing full well it was quite the contrary. At last, Bluey lost patience. She crossed her arms and gave her mom a stern look, firmly saying, "I think Dad should stop playing pretend and come help us." Chili wanted to strike back. "Bluey!" she burst out, but couldn't explain what was the matter with Bandit. She paused again, thinking of what to say next, but her mind went blank. Just then, Bluey noticed something outside the front windshield. Mom?" she asked, feeling a strong sense of fear overtaking her once she determined what she was looking at. "What is it, Bluey?" Pointing her trembling hand out the front windshield, she shakily asked, "Is that Uncle Rad?" Chili and Bingo looked. Oh, it was him all right. They instantly recognized his fur pattern, but not his bodily form. It resembled a real dog of his breed. It wasn't the simple art style used in the television series. Radley was standing on his hind legs, which were disproportionately larger than his upper body, which was so thin that his bones and veins were visible beneath his skin. As for his hands, both looked like heavy sacks of sand, with the left one looking like it was close to detaching from his arm. But the most disturbing feature of all was his face. He had blank eyes, his pupils looked like silver rings, and his toothless mouth was ajar, looking more open in the center than in the edges, and was just as blank as his eyes. The sight overwhelmed the three healers with fright. Their eyes bulged at the figure standing motionless underneath the lamppost light, about 50 feet in front of the car. "Why does he look like that?" Bluey asked, her voice wavering. "Kids, look away," Chili shakily said. When she saw the disturbing-looking figure approaching the car on all fours with that same unsettling look on his face, Chili desperately climbed to the back seat to protect her daughters. "No, no!" she wailed at Radley. "Stay away! Stay away!" "Bluey, hold me!" Bingo cried, embracing her older sister, afraid of what Radley might do to them. Suddenly, she and the girls heard a concussive whack outside, and then heard something hit the hood of the car. They looked. Standing there was someone they also instantly recognized. He held a full-sized wrench and looked down solemnly at Radley, who lay unconscious in front of the car after being struck upside the head. He closed his eyes, his face seeming to say, "Forgive me, brother." Chili hurried out of the car and toward him, crying out, "Oh my God, Stripe? Stripe, is that you?" Stripe dropped the wrench and embraced her. "Thank Christ you're okay, Chili," he told her rather soothingly. "I can't wrap my head around what's going on," Chili explained, tears building up in her eyes. "Is there an infection spreading?" As Bluey and Bingo cautiously stepped out of the car and towards the pair, Stripe replied, "No, I don't think there's an infection, nor does it look like a mutation. I'm not entirely sure what this could be." Pulling his car keys out from his pockets, he finished, "Just get in my car. Trixie and the girls will be glad to see you." "You heard him, girls," Chili told her daughters while Stripe grabbed his eldest brother by the hind legs and dragged him off the road. "But, Mom," Bingo hesitantly asked, "what happened to Uncle Rad? Why does he look all scary?" "He's just not himself, Bingo," sighed Chili, as Stripe leaned Radley's back against a tree. "Now no more questions, all right? We have to go." Bluey and Bingo sadly took one more look at their beloved uncle's grotesque appearance as they climbed into Stripe's SUV. Back in Bandit's subconscious, he heard the reverberating voice repeat, "Hello, Bandit." Chili? He softly asked, looking around for where the voice was originating. He soon spotted his wife and two daughters standing about 10 feet away from him. They had blank expressions and the top halves of their faces faded into blackness. A small smile appeared on Bandit's face as he felt a glimmer of hope within him. Is it really you?" he asked, unaware that they weren't physically with him. I don't know what's happening right now, but as long as we're together," the voice came again. "What would have happened if they hadn't escaped in time?" "What?" Bandit's face dropped as he felt a strong sense of guilt quickly overtaking him. Then he felt something wet on his hands. He looked at his paw-shaped hands and saw blood coating them and his claws flexing out. Bandit widened his eyes, disturbed at what he saw. And if that wasn't bad enough, he looked in front of him and saw his family lying deceased on a large pile of blood. Their bodies were violently mutilated and their organs were spilled out. The upsetting sight caused Bandit to shed tears. He couldn't bear the thought of losing Chili, Bluey, and Bingo, let alone being the sole reason they're gone. All you would have left of them were the precious memories they made for you, and there's nothing else you can do, the voice continued with a rather condescending tone. All you could do was watch them die. Once again, Bandit fell on his knees and cried. At 7:30 p.m., Stripe opened the front door of his house. Entering, he sang, "Honey, look who I've brought!" When Trixie and her daughters caught sight of their aunt and cousins, jubilation and relief exploded among them. "Chili!" Trixie cried. "Trixie!" Chili returned. "Bluey and Bingo!" Socks and Muffin cried. "Muffin and Socks!" Bluey and Bingo returned. The four little girls hugged each other, laughing and their tails wagging excitedly. Trixie looked at her little ones, saying, "Muffin, Socks, go show Bluey and Bingo the playroom." "Okay," they said, and with that they zipped off and Bluey and Bingo followed. Once they were out of sight, Chili abruptly embraced Trixie and ran her hand up and down her back. "Whoa, whoa!" Trixie exclaimed, taken aback. Chili, where's Bandit?" "I lost him. He became one of them," she gravely replied and recounted the events leading up to it. I was playing driver with Bluey and Bingo when we heard strange noises coming from the kitchen. And when I went there to check..." The horrifying werewolf-like image of Bandit returning to Chili's mind caused her to freeze with fright and drive her to tears again. Trixie patted her back to try to comfort her. "I just sped off with the kids and didn't look back," Chili finished. "I know what I saw, but I knew that wasn't Bandit. Still, I think I abandoned him." "No, don't say that," Trixie soothed. "You were only keeping your kids safe." "With that said," Chili continued, "I just need to know one thing. What is happening? What's causing this?" "Well, I'll tell you this," Trixie replied. "A message from the government played over all radio stations. They said they've captured some of those monstrosities, ran tests on them, and found no trace of a virus. Despite that, they've ordered us to evacuate to the military base for shelter before this phenomenon gets worse. However, they found traces of red, misty particles running through their bloodlines. Sadly, the feed cut before they could reveal what it could have been. So if you ask me, we should stay away from anything red." "What time are we evacuating?" Chili asked. "Midnight," Stripe answered. "Be sure to set your alarm for that time. And tell your little ones to be in bed by 8, Trixie added. Acknowledging all of this, Chili let out a heavy sigh. At 12:30 that evening, the seven cautiously made their daring trek through the mostly empty, unlit, and eerily quiet streets of the city. While they were asleep, Stripe's SUV had been siphoned off of gas, so it was no longer an option to reach the base by car. "Are we there yet?" Bingo drowsily asked, fighting to stay awake. "Not quite," Stripe answered, cautiously looking around for any contorted dogs that could ambush him. Chili and Trixie were also staying wary, though Chili was more focused and less sleepy than Trixie. Suddenly, Trixie caught sight of 3 teenage-looking dogs lying deceased on the sidewalk on her right. Unknown to her, those were the bodies of Captain, Mia, and Tiny. Their organs and vessels were spilled out, and large puddles of blood were drying underneath them on the concrete. "Oh my God," she whispered, covering her mouth and her eyes expressing sheer grief for them, since they died young. Muffin noticed her father starting to look apprehensive. "I have a feeling someone is watching us," he told himself under his breath, his nose picking up a scent he didn't recognize. Bluey noticed something too, something that made her heart sink, because she had seen it many times before. It was a bright yellow cap lying upright on the street, with a couple of streaks of blood on it. "Snickers," Bluey whispered gravely, knowing that that cap belonged to him. Presently, Socks caught sight of something emerging from the dark alley to her left. "Look!" she shrieked. Everyone faced what she was pointing at. They saw an adult female dachshund slowly crawling toward them on all fours like an alligator. Her teeth were as pointy as pushpins, and streams of blood leaked and dripped endlessly from her eyes that were stretched vertically and their pupils completely dilated. "That's Michelle!" Chili wailed, trying to contain the horror in her voice. Reaching out his left hand sideways and turning it backwards, Stripe held up the wrench he used to knock out Radley in his right hand, telling the group, "Stay back!" He bravely stared down Michelle, who was slithering closer to him. Bluey, now much farther away from her family, looked up the street and spotted the arcade Snickers always frequented on the right side of the street. She also spotted something dark lying on the sidewalk near the double front doors. She squinted her eyes to see what that dark thing was. It soon struck her when she saw its long snout and body, short legs, arms and tail, and large ears. With her eyes widening and her pupils shrinking, Bluey cried out, "Snickers!" She sprinted over to him, got on her knees, and observed his injuries. Snickers' left arm was gone, the skin covering his whole upper body seemed to have been chewed off, and a part of his right ear was ripped away. On the verge of crying and not knowing what to do, Bluey whispered, "Snickers!" She closed her eyes, slumped forward, and began to weep. "Bluey?" came a weak voice. Bluey's eyes popped open. She looked down again and saw Snickers eyeing her wearily. "It's really you," he wheezed gratefully. What happened to you?" asked Bluey, trembling and hyperventilating. "I was just playing Galaxia, and then my mom started attacking me," Snickers recounted. "She looked like she was mad at me and was all freaky looking. Everything hurts, Bluey. Every single thing. My time has come. I'm going to die now." Desperate to save her friend, Bluey slipped her arms underneath Snickers and tried to lift him from the sidewalk. She channeled every ounce of energy in her arms and legs and was soon able to lift her friend off the ground. But the moment she did, Snickers exclaimed as the weight of his head and legs caused him to bend backwards. "Ow! Ow, Bluey! It hurts worse! Put me back down! It really, really hurts!" A look of shock, then repentance, immediately crossed Bluey's face when she'd realized how much more pain she was inflicting on her friend. With that, she hurriedly but gently laid Snickers back down, replying, "Oh, sorry, Snickers, I'm so sorry." Oh, man," Snickers moaned dreadfully, tears of pain streaming toward the sides of his head. "Oh, biscuits, how can I save him?" Bluey fretted to herself, placing her hands on opposite sides of her cranium and looking down at her friend. "Actually, Bluey, I am saved. Through Jesus Christ," said Snickers hoarsely, tenderly holding her trembling right hand with his left. "I let him into my life and chose to live for him. And very soon, I will enter his kingdom where I will live with him forever, free of pain and sorrow. I'm no longer afraid of dying because I've run the race." Bluey's sad eyes locked on Snickers' weak ones. Who's Jesus, Snickers?" she asked, some confusion on her face. "The way, the truth, and the life," he smiled weakly with his dying breath. "You were an amazing friend, Bluey, and I mean it. Please, don't forget me. But most importantly, never forget Jesus." Snickers' head slowly rolled left, and his hand slowly slipped off Bluey's and plopped on the sidewalk like a rag doll. Fearing the awful truth, she froze and looked at his motionless face, asking, "Snickers?" No response. Bluey desperately nudged his right arm, tearfully saying, "Snickers, stop playing around! Answer me!" Still, he remained unresponsive. Snickers had passed on. Bluey hunched over her friend's carcass and began to cry softly. Then, she heard something creeping up and slowly breathing behind her. Before she could turn around to find out what it was, Stripe and Chili cried out, "Bluey, behind you!" It was Snickers' corrupted mom, Michelle, slowly arching over her and growling menacingly. Bluey was too terrified to find out what was making that noise, but still tried to look behind her. At the same time, Stripe sprinted toward her. He dove in, caught Bluey, and clutched her just before Michelle could propel herself forward to catch her. The two healers rolled a few times from the mighty collision. Thinking fast, Stripe got onto his knees and saw the corrupted, oversized dachshund charging at him on all fours. He pulled out a firearm and carefully aimed it at her face. Then, he shot Michelle in the brain. She ran into an alley and out of his sight. Chili yanked Bluey towards her by the arm, scolding, "Bluey, why did you leave us?" I'm sorry, Mom, she apologized, tears still streaming down her face. "I saw Snickers and thought I could save him." "Oh man, this is bad," fretted Stripe and looked at his family. "Guys, we better hustle. The base is only..." Suddenly, Michelle lunged from the alley behind him and bit off a small chunk of his hip. Immediately, blood began spewing out of the affected area, and Stripe staggered aimlessly before falling to the ground. "Stripe!" The 6 other healers wailed, Trixie and her daughters looking most distraught. Clasping her arm, Chili urged, "Trixie, we need to go now!" But Trixie sprinted over to her severely injured husband. At the same time, Snickers' mom prowled around to strike a second time. Keeping his eyes locked on her while enduring the excruciating pain in his hip, Stripe slowly raised his violently trembling arm to make a second attempt to shoot the corrupted dachshund. As she charged at him with her mouth open, Stripe timed himself to make another attempt. He fired the bullet, which found its way into the back of her mouth, causing her to fall backward and hit the ground dead. Trixie got on her knees and looked at her husband's face. She could see his bottom lip quivering as he breathed unevenly. "Stripe!" she wailed, urgently trying to get his attention. "Stripe! Honey, look at me, please! Get up! We can patch up that wound once we get to the base!" Stripe held his wife's violently trembling hand and found his voice. "Go," he whispered weakly. Socks and Muffin slowly approached him, horrified by all the blood almost flowing like a river from his hip. "Dad? Are you okay?" asked Socks. Teary-eyed Muffin voiced her thoughts. "Dad! You have..." Bluey ran in and kneeled right beside him. "Uncle Stripe, get up!" she urged, grasping his left arm. "I don't want to lose you either!" Stripe inhaled deeply and gasped to his family. "Leave me. Go to the base. I love all of you." Chili tenderly grabbed Trixie's other hand and pulled her up as she began to cry. She refused to leave her husband when he was in critical condition. However, he wanted to ensure their safety, so it was for the best. With that, the 6 melancholic healers continued advancing in the direction they were previously going. An hour later, they were almost 3 miles outside of the city. Sadness was written all over their faces, as they had no choice but to leave Stripe behind. Bluey and Bingo tried to comfort Muffin and Socks, while Chili tried comforting Trixie. After remaining silent for the past hour, Trixie expressed her grief through words, keeping her sight on the ground. "My hand was the last thing he ever held. I love you was the last thing he ever said. We were the last things he ever saw." Trixie," Chili sympathized. "He just wanted to ensure our safety." Trixie stopped walking, and her face went from grief-stricken to enraged. She clenched her fists and began to seethe. "I swear, when I find the fuckers responsible for this mess, there will be hell to pay. Muffin, Socks, Bluey, and Bingo exchanged expressions, having never seen Trixie look so vengeful or heard her use profanity. The next thing they knew, they heard a car coming. They looked and saw headlights approaching them at around 45 miles per hour. The lights illuminated the four girls, but they were not slowing down. Sensing an imminent collision with their little ones, Chili and Trixie sprinted into the car's path and shoved them out of the way, crying out, "Watch out!" Bluey, Bingo, and Muffin staggered while Socks hit the ground. The vehicle that was a pickup truck collided with Trixie and Chili, careened off the road, and slammed into a tree. And despite the front being damaged beyond repair, whoever was at the wheel still had their foot on the accelerator, making the rear wheels continue to spin. Bluey, Bingo, and Muffin, who had seen everything, wailed in one voice, "Mom!" They ran over to them while Socks looked and saw Trixie and Chili lying motionless on the road with their eyes closed. Bluey and Bingo sprinted to their mom and looked at her face, trembling uncontrollably. They had never felt so scared, since they were unsure of whether she or their aunt was alive. "What do we do now, Bluey?" asked Muffin, just as terrified and confused. Bluey couldn't think. She now feared that Chili and Trixie could be dead, and it didn't help that there were no other adults around. Just then, the girls heard what sounded like a large vehicle approaching. They looked and saw bright lights poking through the shadows. Soon enough, a military vehicle came into view and stopped beside the healers. A squad of 5 large dogs wearing full body armor and holding firearms readily rushed out of the vehicle. They began surveying Trixie, Chili, and the surrounding area, while some went to check on the driver, still inside the car. A German Shepherd gently placed his thumb on Trixie's wrist to check her pulse and reported, "She's all right, she's only unconscious." "This one too," a Belgian Shepherd confirmed, by Chili. The squad leader, who seemed a bit familiar to Bluey, acknowledged. "Put a muzzle on her, she might go feral." "Sorry, kids," another squad member, a terrier, told Muffin and Socks before carrying them in her arms. "Rah!" Muffin raucously cried out, not liking being carried by a stranger, and desperately waved her arm up and down. "Let me go! Mom! Mom!" I think she's trying to help us, Muffin," Socks pointed out. As the squad leader supervised his team doing what they must, Bluey approached him. "Hey," she timidly said. Are you Rusty's dad?" the squad leader interjected. "Yeah, that's me. I heard Rusty say many great things about you, Bluey. He and the rest of your friends will be thrilled to see you safe and sound at the base." A squad member approached Rusty's dad. "Sir, we got a report from Squad 3 that they've recovered 2 people who are alive but in critical condition," she informed him. "Very good," Rusty's dad acknowledged. "Tell them to report to the base immediately." He turned to Bluey and Bingo. "And you two, get in the vehicle. You are safe now." Without hesitation, they climbed aboard while Trixie and Chili were carried aboard by 2 squad members. Once everyone reboarded, the vehicle made its way back. What almost felt like an instant after getting hit by that truck, Chili regained consciousness. She found herself lying in a hospital room. She slowly sat up, placing her hand on her head. She softly groaned, feeling slightly dizzy. "What happened?" Bluey, anxiously sitting in the corner of the room, heard her. She shot her head up and spotted her. "Mom!" she cried out, running to her. "Bluey!" Chili cried back, spotting her daughter. She jumped out of the bed and the two embraced each other. "Oh, Bluey, thank goodness you're all right." Then she noticed something. "Wait." She leaned back and eyed her daughter, asking, "Bluey, where's Bingo?" "Upstairs playing with the others. I didn't want her to worry about you." "Upstairs? Others?" Chili asked, most confused, and looked around the room. "Bluey, where are we? What's the time? And where are Trixie, Muffin, and Socks?" You're at the military base in the infirmary, and it's 6:12 p.m. came a solemn voice Chili instantly recognized but was not expecting. She turned around and saw her older sister Brandy standing at the door. She was wearing a protective black vest and a headset. Chili gazed at her, relieved to see her but also confused. "Brandy," she uttered with a small smile. "You're here?" Brandy gave a weak nod, looking rather glum. "Yep. And Trixie's in room 105 with Stripe. Their kids are also playing upstairs." "Stripe is alive?" Chili asked in surprise. "Yeah, my squad recovered him almost 16 hours ago, and the nurses have patched up the hole in his hip. Now they're focused on putting him on life support." Now Chili never felt so relieved, and couldn't imagine how much more Trixie probably was. Then she noticed her older sister looking dreadfully burdened. But instead of asking her what was the matter, she asked, "Why are you wearing that vest and headset?" "I'm fixing my mistake," Brandy answered, looking like she was about to cry. "What mistake?" Chili inquired. Words quickly got choked up in Brandy's mouth. She really didn't want to answer, but knew that if she didn't, her already strained relationship with Chili would become uglier, and possibly beyond repair. With that, she tearfully burst out, "This whole mess, Chili, this phenomenon of grown dogs turning distorted and feral, all of this is my fault." Chili and Bluey exchanged looks and pointed their faces back at Brandy. I don't understand," Chili replied, lost in confusion. "How can this be your fault?" "I was just trying to save my business and eventually started scrambling for solutions," Brandy explained, her ears flopped backwards. "And then..." She paused dramatically. "That's when I stumbled across them," she finished meekly. "Across what?" Chili asked. Brandy pulled out a small evidence bag and showed what was inside, answering, "Red mist berries." Chili's eyes bulged. She remembered seeing those exact berries on the kitchen counter before Bandit got affected. As she began to piece together how it led up to this, Brandy informed her, "I had no idea they were capable of this, Chili. They looked and smelled scrumptious, and I decided to add them to my inventory." Chili began recounting. "That day you brought onesies as presents for Bluey and Bingo? And then you showed me that basket of those berries? You told me you were gonna sell them all across town?" She concluded, "This really is all your fault. You upended all of our lives just to keep your business running." With anger simmering within her, Chili clenched her fists and gave Brandy a savage look. "And now, families are being torn apart and will never be the same, all because of you!" she roared. "So, that's why Dad's not here?" Bluey piped up when the realization struck her. "Because he became feral?" "Yes, Bluey, the cat is now out of the bag," Chili exclaimed. Bluey gave her aunt a look of utmost betrayal, which made her feel worse. "Brandy," she softly uttered. "I'm sorry, Bluey," Brandy replied. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Once Bluey saw how repentant her aunt looked, a hint of forgiveness crossed her face. Then another thing entered her mind. "But," she added, "there's something I don't understand. If the berries make us feral, why didn't it happen to me and Bingo? We ate the berries this morning." "Yeah, answer that for us, Brandy," Chili insisted, her arms crossed. "Will my kids also succumb to this fate?" "Well, the medical expert is currently figuring it out and keeping me informed, and so far the result is slowly becoming no," Brandy explained. "None of the sightings or reports included children." Well, this is still a lose-lose situation for everyone involved, huffed Chili. You've scarred my kids for life. Brandy's ears drooped forward as she broke down in tears. I'm very sorry, Chili. I thought that if those berries became my hottest product, it would generate enough money to save my business and finally fix my infertility. As sincere as that apology was, Chili was so livid at her older sister's selfish yet admittedly accidental move that she couldn't forgive her. Instead, she punched her hard in the snout, bursting out, "You bitch! Mom!" Bluey wailed, taken aback. Brandy hit the floor and blood began to leak from her nostrils. Bluey faced her and cried, "Brandy, are you okay?" Brandy didn't answer. She was too shocked by the blow Chili delivered on her. A Dalmatian squad member hurriedly checked into the room to see what the commotion was. When he saw Chili looking at Brandy with sheer contempt in her eyes, he aimed his firearm at her, barking, "Step away from her and put your hands up!" Chili and Bluey looked. "Do it now!" the squad member commanded with a more threatening expression. Chili obeyed. Is Mom going to jail?" Bluey asked the Dalmatian, never feeling more concerned for her. "No, I'm taking her to where she can't harm anyone," he answered, grabbing Chili's hands, placing them behind her back, and cuffing them. "Frank, wait," said Brandy, putting her hand up. But Frank exited the room with Chili. "Mom!" Bluey cried, running to the doorway and stopping there. She looked at Brandy and tremulously asked, "Brandy?" "I'm okay, Bluey," she replied, getting up from the floor. "It's just a nosebleed." A little later, Frank uncuffed Chili and shoved her through a doorway leading into what seemed to be a storage unit. "Get in there," he austerely told her before slamming the door shut and locking it. Brandy approached him, taking out her hand. "Frank, hand me the keys," she instructed. "What's that?" "Let me in there. I must get something across to Chili." "Are you nuts, Brandy? She could have fractured your snout with that blow. This is the last thing this operation needs, to have you, the leader, to be too injured to put a stop to this phenomenon." "If I get too injured, then so be it," Brandy sharply replied. "I'm more than capable of giving orders while in the infirmary. Just let me in there so that I can talk to her, and don't come in if we end up throwing hands." Frank let out a deep sigh and unlocked the door. Brandy entered the room that was actually a laboratory and spotted her younger sister sulking, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed and her eyes pointed at the floor. Chili straightened her back and saw her older sister standing by the doorway. Immediately, the look of contempt returned to her face. Brandy wiped the blood off with her hand. Then she heard Chili softly say with suppressed rage, "How could you? This will be something nobody, and I mean nobody, will ever recover from." Approaching her, Brandy repentantly but austerely replied, "Chili, listen to me. But Chili punched her again, this time on the side of her head. "No, I won't!" she exploded, quivering with fury. "You took away the love of my life!" "Chili, please," Brandy pleaded. "I think I found—" Then she was struck a third time, in the mouth. Finally, she lost patience. "I said I didn't know!" she roared, delivering an uppercut to Chili's snout. It was powerful enough to make her stagger backward and hit the floor. Presently outside, Frank struggled to restrain himself from bursting inside and breaking up the fight. Brandy breathed forcefully through her mouth as she looked at Chili lying on the floor. She again wiped the blood off her snout before going to a desk to take something from it. Then, thwack! Chili delivered another blow to the back of Brandy's head. Brandy fell forward and her head hit the tabletop with a loud thud, rattling the items on them and causing further bleeding in her snout and lower lip. Chili stood 3 feet behind her, with her teeth and fists clenched and pure hatred in her eyes. "What makes you think I'll ever trust you?" she questioned. She clasped Brandy's ears and the back of her vest, telling her, "This is a third of the pain I'm feeling from losing Bandit." She slammed Brandy's head against the tabletop, causing 2 teeth to fall out of her mouth, and threw her onto the floor. Then she noticed what looked like a handgun on the desk. At the same time, Brandy lay on the floor, her eyes closed and breathing slowly and shakily from all the pain she was enduring. She propped herself up when she'd found the strength to do so. Brandy popped open her eyes when she heard the soft metallic sound. She looked and saw Chili pointing a gun at her face, with an expression that could be described as the 1,000-yard stare. Reaching out her hand, she made one last desperate attempt to make her listen. "Don't do this, Chili! I swear I can reverse all of this! Just take a minute to listen to me!" Concurrently outside, Frank also saw the same picture. "Fuck me!" he cried, hurriedly grabbing his walkie-talkie. "Attention! I need every squad member near Laboratory B to immediately assemble near the area." Meanwhile, Pat walked up to the front door of someone's home. Just like Brandy and the squad members, he was also wearing a protective vest and mask. He looked at the packet he was holding, telling himself, "Alright, I just gotta look for my next assignment and retrieve them to the base." He began to look through the packet for the next page without a red stamp reading void or valid. Once he found it, he told himself, "Okay, her name is Frisky." He looked up and saw his next assignment already standing by the opened front door. Her face couldn't have looked more expressionless. Pat was taken aback, but he cleared his throat when he quickly recovered. "Frisky, we've received your distress signal," he told her. "I'm here to transport you to the military base." But Frisky remained there, having that same look on her face. Pat removed his protective goggles, asking, Frisky?" He then saw her eyes go blank, her wavy hair extend, her smiling mouth become toothless, and her body going as thin as Radley's, her ribcage showing underneath. "Shit!" Pat cried out with horror, dropping his clipboard and taking a few steps back. I'm too late! You've gone feral!" Frisky made hissing noises that violently fluctuated in volume and continuously overlapped with each other as she slithered toward the grown gold dog on all fours. Pat promptly discharged the taser and used it on her. Frisky got zapped with no more than 1,500 volts for a few seconds before falling unconscious on the ground. Pat glumly gazed at her motionless body before finding the kitchen. He found the red mist berries sitting among the baking needs on the countertop. "She ate them," he sighed heavily. "How many more will succumb to this fate before Project Green begins?" Back in the laboratory where Chili punched Brandy 4 times, she still had the gun aimed at her head. Brandy remained where she was propping herself up, her heart pounding. She was earnestly hoping that Chili would reconsider, given that she didn't know anything about reversing the effects the berries caused. At the same time, Chili seemed to mentally debate whether to gun down her older sister in cold blood. After all, she single-handedly caused the phenomenon, but was profusely apologetic about it, as this was done without any malicious intent. Finally, Chili conceded, firmly closing her eyes and begrudgingly uttering, "God damn it!" She flung the handgun straight down, which clattered loudly when it hit the floor. Brandy first looked at the firearm, then at her younger sister. She could see the shame expressed all over her body. "What good would it have been to shoot you dead?" Chili glumly asked herself, looking at the floor. There's already enough hurt going around the family. Brandy slowly got up and kept her eyes on what could have been her murderer. She sighed through her nose and softly said, "Chili, I cannot apologize enough. And you have every right to be angry at me. I understand if you never want to forgive me or talk to me ever again. I'm no longer worried about keeping my business open. If it goes down under once the situation is solved, then so be it. Can't say it wasn't well deserved after the mess I'd caused. Now please look at me and listen to me. I can fix all of this." Chili wearily eyed her sister and reluctantly obeyed. "Fire away," she said. Brandy went to a metal container at the side of the room, saying, "I devoted a good amount of time creating a remedy." The container opened with a soft, long hiss as cold steam billowed out. Brandy grabbed some tweezers and used them to take her remedy from the container and showed it to Chili. "This is what I came up with." Chili looked. It was a green grape with green mist surrounding it. "I went to collect some berries where I originally found them so I could start experimenting on them," Brandy recounted. "But as I did, I suddenly felt I was being watched. And when I grabbed my flashlight..." The image of Rusty's corrupted mom was too chilling for Brandy to describe. The best she could put it was, "Its towering body just stood there and stared at me. It was the most unsettling thing I'd ever seen. I tried to shoot it, but apparently the red berries also make them immune to physical pain. So I ran as fast as I could back to where my squad was waiting. Fortunately, they were able to contain the monster that was pursuing me. After that terrifying incident," Brandy continued, "I promptly began experimenting to find how the berries affect grown dogs. It didn't take long for me to discover that the mist they released when chewed on contains particles that hijack the brain, causing the eater to look and sound disturbing. However, kids like Bluey and Bingo don't get affected. At all. My only explanation is that their mental health and immune system are significantly more stable than grown-ups, since they haven't been through much. That said, I altered the capabilities of the red mist berries with their saliva and carefully concocted green mist berries. Though I never got around to testing it, I'm almost positive that this will revert grown-ups to their normal state." Brandy looked at Chili, who had her left hand on her right arm, requesting, "So please, just help me this once?" Chili hesitated. She had some skepticism because it seemed that Brandy created the remedy in a short time, which would bring a reasonable assumption that she rushed this process. On the other hand, Brandy seemed serious about eradicating the effects and made the smart choice of returning to where she first found the berries. So Chili took her hand and answered, "Okay, I'll help you, just so everything can go back to normal." A small, appreciative smile came upon Brandy's face. "Thanks for listening," she replied. The two heard the garage door open. They saw a group of squad members standing outside, all pointing their weapons at Chili. Frank had informed them of what he saw. "Put your hands up!" one of the members barked at her. "Uh-oh," Chili thought to herself, freezing with fear. But Brandy promptly stepped in front of her, commanding, "Stop!" Right then and there, all the squad members put their weapons down. "Apologies, Brandy," they said. Frank, most surprised, asked her, "You weren't shot?" Bluey rushed to the front of the group and spotted her mom in the lab. "Mom!" she wailed, visibly worried. "What happened in there?" Chili solemnly gazed at her daughter before she sheepishly replied, "Nothing. We just made up." "Alex," said Brandy, stepping up to him, "inform the general to rally the soldiers, fuel up the jets and vehicles, and put them all on standby. The remedy is ready to be tested." Alex nodded with acknowledgement and immediately went on his way while the rest of the group dispersed. At the same time, Chili took Bluey's hand and walked with her to a different part of the base. Bluey still felt glum about the current circumstances, until she heard Rusty gratefully cry out, "Bluey!" She raised her eyes and was quickly surrounded by all her friends from school. They began verbally expressing how glad they were to see her just fine. Presently, Bingo ran towards Chili, beaming, "Mom, you're okay!" Beaming back, Chili carried her youngest daughter and affectionately rubbed her nose with hers, replying, "Bingo! It's so good to see you again!" The jubilation among the kids was overwhelming, enough to make anyone smile. "We have everyone," said Indy to nobody in particular. That is, until Mackenzie noticed something. "Wait, no we don't, someone's still missing." "Oh yeah," the terriers acknowledged, looking around the group. "Who are we missing?" asked Pom Pom. Indy now remembered. "Snickers! Where's Snickers?" she asked curiously. "Oh yeah, where is that long dog?" asked Coco. Bluey knew. The memory of her watching him die right in front of her on that sidewalk drove her to despair. Thus, she ran off and began to weep. Some of the kids in the group noticed her. Winton reached his hand out at her, asking, "Bluey, where are you going?" Concerned for her, Chili followed Bluey and soon found her standing at the top of a hill, sorrowfully gazing at the starlit night sky. She slowly approached her, gently asking, "Bluey, are you okay?" Bluey hugged her, tearfully replying, "No, I miss Snickers." "Oh, I know you do, sweetie," Chili sympathized, hugging her back. "He was a great kid." Bluey sat down crisscrossed on the grass and looked back at the sky. The shimmering stars seemed to form a constellation of that hilarious moment when she held Snickers like a battering ram. Chili sat down crisscrossed next to her and also looked up. Bluey leaned against her side, and Chili began to stroke her back slowly. "I know how you feel, Bluey," she solemnly told her. "You do?" "Of course. When I lost my mom, that was the first time I'd ever felt pain from losing someone closest to me. I was 9 years old when she passed, and Brandy was 11. Bluey could see how down Chili looked. She snuggled up to her and told her, "I don't like seeing you sad." "Me either, Bluey," Chili replied, leaning against her to further comfort her. "Actually, I don't like seeing anyone sad," Bluey added, "and I don't like it when I'm sad." "I know you don't, but sometimes it's good to cry, Bluey, especially from losing someone who meant so much to you," Chili pointed out thoughtfully. "You want to know something about loss?" "What?" "At first, the pain becomes unbearable, but over time it will only become less so. And do you know why?" "No." "Because you have all the great memories that person created for you. And while having a good cry about losing that person comes naturally, there's something that comes unnaturally, and that's celebrating the impact that person had on you." A small smile came upon Bluey's face. "Yeah," she nodded slowly, feeling reminiscent. "Snickers was a great friend. It was so funny seeing him rolling down that hill like a log," she tittered. Chili chuckled with her mouth shut at the picture her daughter had created. "But he told me the strangest thing I've ever heard," Bluey added, her smile turning into a frown, and Chili looked back at her. "Snickers said something about living for this guy named Jesus and running the race. And if you do, you'll live in his kingdom forever." She faced her mom, saying, I didn't know you live a second life after you die. And I didn't know that in that second life, it never ends." Chili acknowledged what her daughter had commented and replied, "Snickers is right about what he told you, but he forgot to mention one thing." "What's that?" Bluey inquired. "If you choose not to live for Jesus, you're in danger of suffering eternal separation from him in a place that's 1,000,000 times worse than the most dangerous country in the world." "Really?" Bluey asked, looking concerned. "Yeah, but Jesus gives you the option to turn from your immoral ways." Bluey began to listen intently to Chili. "There are only 2 roads people take, Bluey, and that's the narrow one that leads to life and the wide one that leads to destruction. Many take the bad road because they think they know better than Jesus, and that stems from pride, which is the birth mother of all wickedness. After they die, they will spend eternity in the kingdom of darkness. On the other hand, very few take the good road because it demands incredible courage and humility, since they know that they will be mocked, rejected, beaten, or even killed for their faith. But Jesus suffered all of that, so he knows very well what it's like. Therefore, in the end, it'll all be worth it because you never gave up on the one who never gives up on you." There are many different perspectives on what happens after you die, Bluey, but the one I just told you is the correct one. So I'm gonna leave you with this question. Do you want to live selfishly or selflessly? It's your choice. Bluey seemed that she would have a lot of thinking to do from now on. Chili rose from the grass, telling her, "Now let's go see Stripe and Trixie." With that, Bluey followed her mom back to the infirmary. A little later, Chili found Trixie in room 105, sitting on a chair and holding Stripe's hand as he lay in the bed, on life support. She was glad but upset to see him in this condition. "Thank Christ Brandy's squad found him," she said. "Yeah," Trixie chuckled. "You have no idea how relieved I was. I almost passed out." "I would have too," Chili chuckled back. "Chili," came Brandy's voice. She turned around and saw her standing by the doorway. "We're all set to go." Trixie's face went from thankful to surprised. "You're going with her?" she asked Chili. "I have to, Trixie. I need to be there to see Bandit return to normal." Trixie acknowledged and rose from her chair, replying, "Well..." She wrapped her head around what to tell Chili before she could leave, but couldn't think of anything other than, "Good luck." That was enough to make Chili smile warmly and hug her. "Thank you, Trix. I'll contact you at my earliest convenience." "Mom?" came Bluey's voice. Chili looked at her and saw her playing with her hands and looking nervous about what she wanted to say next. "Me and Bingo are coming too." "Yeah, we want to see Dad again," Bingo added. "We care about him too." Chili hesitated but figured her daughters had been away from him long enough. "Okay," she answered, "but you two are staying in the car. It's too dangerous." "Okay," Bluey nodded. "Just get Dad back." "I will try my best, honey," Chili answered tenderly. A senior Scottish Terrier doctor walked in, holding a clipboard in one hand and 2 gas masks in the other. "Okay, Brandy," he told her with a husky voice. "We will deploy Project Green if this remedy works on Bandit Healer." "Here are the masks," he added, handing them to her. "The car is ready." "All right, Chili, let's roll," Brandy said bravely. "Come on, kids," Chili told her daughters, gesturing them to follow her. A little later, the 4 got into the military vehicle. Pat was at the wheel. As they fastened their seatbelts, Brandy said, "Oh, and one more thing, Chili. God forbid this cure doesn't work." Chili eyed her sister and waited for her to finish. "We're gonna have to neutralize Bandit." Chili's pupil shrank as she felt a wave of nervousness passing through her. This was the last thing she'd want happening to him. But given that Brandy was the leader of this operation and therefore the most knowledgeable, she stopped resisting the undesirable outcome. "I'll take my chances," she glumly replied, looking at the floor. "This is the only way. I just hope, as daring as this mission is, maybe, just maybe, we'll complete it." Brandy gave a small nod and replied, "I'm counting on it." Pat, also feeling anxious, turned the engine on and set off for the healer's residence. Later that evening, they arrived. Pat kept the vehicle locked, though Bluey and Bingo were asleep inside. Brandy and Chili stood on the walkway leading to the porch steps. They gazed at the house where Bandit was still lurking somewhere inside. Never in their lives had they felt more apprehensive, but they had to test the remedy. "Are you ready to face the incomprehensible horrors creeping behind that door?" Brandy darkly asked Chili. Chili took a deep breath and replied, "As I'll ever be." Brandy pulled the firearm containing the green Miss Berries out of one of her pockets on her protective vests. "Once we find him," she told Chili, "I'll shoot the berry at him, but he must be shot in the mouth if we want the berry to take full effect." "Whatever you say, Brandy," Chili acknowledged and made for the front door, determinedly saying, "Now let's hop to it." "Wait!" Brandy cried out, gesturing to Chili to stop, and she did. Brandy pulled another firearm from her vest and handed it to her. "Here," she told her. If this test ultimately goes south, you know what to do. Yeah, Chili gravely remembered, dreading the outcome. With that, the two went up the porch stairs and Chili unlocked the front door. Once opened, she and Brandy looked inside. They saw some belongings strewn on the floor and furniture torn and chewed on. Good to be home, sorta, Chili commented to Brandy. Don your mask, Brandy instructed. Once they had them worn, they felt slightly less vulnerable to Bandit's attacks. Brandy turned on her flashlight, and she and Chili began creeping around the living room, staying as cautious as they could while they looked sharp for Bandit. After not finding him there, they proceeded to the kitchen. Chili looked at the counter and spotted the bowl of red mist berries that Bandit ate from. She then looked at the mirror mounted on the wall. She saw the reflection of her older sister, and a silhouette of a werewolf-like figure looming over her in the hallway. Chili's eyes almost popped out of her sockets when she realized what that creature was. She quickly turned around and wailed, "Brandy, he's behind you!" Brandy turned around and froze in fear when she saw Bandit looking down at her and giving her a chilling smile. Chili sprinted toward her and knocked her out of Bandit's reach just before he could claw her deep. The collision caused Brandy to drop the gun by accident and both masks to come off. The gun slid underneath the counter at the side of the kitchen and the mask's lenses shattered on impact with the floor. "The masks!" Chili wailed, propping herself up and looking at them. "My gun!" Brandy wailed, now noticing that she didn't have it. The two faced Bandit, remaining by the doorway. He looked ready to devour them. "Brandy, find the gun!" Chili urgently instructed. "I'll hold Bandit off!" "Righto!" While Brandy hopped to it, Chili forcibly removed a leg from one of the stools by the counter. She held the leg close to her and stared down her corrupted husband. "All right, Bandit, let's dance," her face seemed to say. Accepting the challenge, Bandit charged at his wife. Chili swung the leg as hard as she could, but Bandit dodged it by ducking. He lowered himself and, once he was in front of Chili again, bit the stool leg she was holding and yanked it from her grip by forcibly turning his head sideways and crushed the leg to pieces with his teeth. Now, with nothing to weaponize, Chili tried sprinting into the living room, but Bandit grabbed her tail. "Whoop!" she yelped when her tail got tugged on and hit the floor. Brandy raised her head in the direction she heard the cry and was horrified. Chili rolled onto her back and desperately tried to pull her tail free from under Bandit's paw, but couldn't because he had it firmly on the floor. As Bandit lowered to probably bite off her intestines, Chili searched her surroundings to see if there was anything within her reach she could weaponize. At the same time, Brandy hurriedly took a half-full glass of bottle of sangria from the counter and struck the back of Bandit's head with all her might. The force was strong enough for him to be semi-conscious. Chili, hyperventilating and her hand over her pounding heart, watched Bandit hit the floor with a heavy thud. Collecting herself, she pulled her tail free and rose from the floor. "Thanks a million, Brandy," she panted. "Don't mention it," she replied, returning to searching for her weapon. "Now, I think the gun is around here somewhere. Just hurry before Bandit revives!" But unknown to Chili, he just did. The next thing she knew, she was clasped by the arm and lifted from the floor. "Wah!" she exclaimed. "Chili?" asked Brandy, looking back at her. "Chili!" she wailed with her eyes bulged, seeing Bandit hurling his wife through the doorway and into the living room closet. Chili's back hit the back wall with a mighty wham, and the door flew shut. The impact rattled various knickknacks and ornaments, causing them to fall and hit the floor. It took several seconds for Chili's conscience to be fully restored. Once she'd found herself on the floor in the closet, she realized that Brandy was alone with Bandit. Driven to desperation, Chili grabbed the door handle and turned it. However, the door wouldn't open, which further fueled her anxiety. She slammed her fist on the door, wailing, "Brandy! Brandy, are you there? Is everything okay?" She got no response. Panicked beyond what she could mentally handle, Chili clutched her head, breathing rapidly through her mouth and her whole body trembling violently. She frantically wondered how to get the door open and feared that Bandit might have claimed Brandy's life. Then, she remembered something. "Oh!" Chili told herself, freezing, and pulled out the gun Brandy had given her. She placed it against the handle and fired a bullet. Chili kicked the door open and rushed into the kitchen, still breathing through her mouth. She spotted the gun Brandy was searching for, but Brandy was nowhere to be seen. Where was she? Somewhere in the house, running from Bandit. She had no idea where she was going, given that she hardly ever visited. Her hopes of hiding from Bandit were soon dashed when she ran into a wall at the end of the hall with no doorway to enter through. "Dead end!" she cried to herself. Then, she heard approaching footsteps. She turned around and saw Bandit slowly closing in on her on all fours. Brandy pressed her back ever harder against the wall. "Chili, please come find me," she pleaded tremulously, lowering herself to the floor. In Bandit's subconscious, something caught his eye. It was all too familiar in color, but the opposite in bodily appearance. Observing the figure, he stated, "You look just like..." When he saw how distorted and terrifying she looked, and that her right hand and left ear were torn off, Bandit realized that was not his wife. "Who are you?" he barked severely at her. "What is this place? What have you done to my family?" The figure started twitching its head aimlessly left and right, and its arms aimlessly up and down in complete silence. Bandit was beginning to feel uneasy by what he was seeing. That was when the figure stopped twitching. It relaxed his arms and straightened its head. Then it spoke backward, its mouth opening and closing a tad instead of sinking to what it was saying. Now Bandit was more uneasy, though he couldn't take his eyes off the figure and didn't know why. Then his eyes caught something else, a distorted version of Bluey, except her arms looked like a capital F stretched horizontally, and all the flesh on her upper body was missing, exposing her heart, lungs, and rib cage. That figure also began to speak backward. More unsettled than he ever was, Bandit placed his hand over his throbbing heart and felt his legs feeling like noodles. He fell onto his knees and felt the ground softening into wet sand. "What is happening?" he tremulously asked himself. "You are weak," came the voice that first spoke to him. Bandit's ears picked up thick squelching noises. He looked in front of him and saw an antique mirror take form. In the mirror was Brandy looking at him in sheer horror. "Brandy?" Bandit asked, concerned for her. Back in the real world, Brandy remained on the floor, her back pressed against the wall. Chili still hadn't found her. Now believing this was the end, Brandy faced away, clenched her teeth, and shut her eyes tight. Then, she heard Chili savagely bark, "Leave my sister and husband alone, you corrupted motherfucker!" Bandit turned around, and Brandy opened her eyes and leaned leftward to get a better view. They saw Chili standing boldly where the two halls intersected, with the firearm loaded with green mist berries in her grip. "Chili!" Brandy gratefully cried, feeling a bit of weight lift from her shoulders. "Your time is up," Chili gruffly told Bandit, aiming the gun at his mouth, and fired a shot. The grape zoomed across the air and into the roof of Bandit's mouth, where its juice and children's saliva splattered in all directions. At that moment, the corrupted Bandit froze like a statue and frowned. At the same time, the normal Bandit, still trapped in his subconscious, felt as if he'd been shot in the gut. His stomach churned unpleasantly before he began vomiting a whole river of blood. Chili and Brandy watched the werewolf collapse to the floor. It looked like he was suffering an epileptic seizure, squirming violently, as the berry's effects were starting to seize him. They saw his eyes roll back. "Bandit," Chili uttered meekly, affected by what she was witnessing. At the same time, Brandy placed her hand over her mouth, believing that her remedy was working. Back in his subconscious, the real Bandit panted heavily. He could hear the river of blood flowing like a stream. Then he noticed something rising from it. He kept his eyes on it until it had completely taken form. It looked like him, but much more menacing and realistic looking, and was outlined in red. Who are you? Asked Bandit. Insanity, said the entity with a deep demonic voice, flexing his claws out. Huh? When you lose your shit, I'm in control, the entity clarified. All you think about is behaving like that, without thinking about how it would affect those around you. I've fully controlled you since you ate the red mist berries. And while I was, you weren't able to restrain yourself. All you could do was see what you were doing. The entity approached Bandit slowly, telling him, This isn't possession, nor am I some dream demon. I'm you. Bandit was both upset and petrified. He didn't want to know how violent he must have been toward Chili or Brandy when he was being controlled. And the fact that he knew what he was doing and couldn't stop himself made it terrifying and all the more upsetting. But now, continued the figure, melting slowly like soft-serve ice cream, you're in control. No longer corrupted, no longer feral. It's time for you to wake up. Bandit almost couldn't believe it. Was this really for real? Was this entity actually telling him that? And is he really not a demon? He couldn't know. Therefore, he hesitated. Get up! The figure snapped. There came a reverberating and loud click. Right then and there, Bandit felt his adrenaline run wild and saw the entity turn to water until there was nothing left of it. His eyes then closed tightly without command, and then he heard a powerful, constant blast of wind. After being unable to open his eyes and feeling the wind for about 5 terrifying seconds, Bandit inhaled deeply, opening his eyes wide. Right then and there, the wind stopped. Once his breathing went from heavy to normal, Bandit found himself lying on the floor of his house and in his regular self. He sat up, placing his hand on his noggin as he felt some pain there. Oh, he moaned. What just happened? He froze when his eyes caught Chili and Brandy frozen like statues and staring at him, their mouths ajar and their pupils shrunken in surprise. Bandit? Asked Chili tremulously, her ears drooping back and a tear forming in her right eye. Chili? Bandit feebly returned. The two kept their eyes locked on each other, wondering if this was reality. Outside, where the moonlight was bright, Bluey, Bingo, and Pat still waited anxiously in the military vehicle. But when they saw Bandit and Chili standing on the walkway holding each other's hands, their mood made a complete 180. Dad! Bluey and Bingo gratefully cried out, jumping out of the car. Kids! Bandit cried back, beaming and opening his arms wide as his daughters ran towards him. The three hugged each other and laughed joyously as their lives were restored to full color. Brandy savored every second of watching the healers finally having a happy moment together. Mission accomplished, she proudly told herself. It would take another 2 weeks for the phenomenon to finally be eradicated. Those who were affected by the red mist berries were soon reunited with their families, while those who suffered critical injuries would undergo rehabilitation for at least another 4 weeks. However, this wasn't an entirely happy ending, as there was grief among the kids from the untimely loss of their schoolmate Snickers. Thus, they all attended his funeral to pay their respects to him. As for the healers, Radley, Frisky, and Nana made a surprise visit at Bluey's house to let them know that they have fully recovered. But Stripe would still need a few more weeks for the wound in his hip to heal. As Bandit and Chili sat together on the swinging bench in the back patio while Bluey and Bingo played with their cousins in the yard, they gazed at the abundantly sunny sky before pointing their contented eyes at each other. On top of the phenomenon now being a thing of the past, Bandit let Chili know of something that could benefit him and his family in the near future. I got an out-of-state job opportunity that pays well. It's a great opportunity, especially considering what we've recently been through. We can start fresh. Chili acknowledged, raising her eyebrows. We'll see. Indeed. But one thing was for sure. While physical wounds would eventually fade, the same couldn't be said for psychological wounds. This would be something everyone involved would remember for the rest of their lives. But by the looks of it, it seemed that the healers had already moved on.